I'm Bill Allison, and I'm really delighted to be here. I really believe in the mission of DECODE, which is why I joined the board. And I'm super excited because this is one of the first in-person conferences I've been to. And also, DECODE, this is a chance for us to see it in action. And unpacking and decoding the tech industry in Silicon Valley is something that I really wish that I had had when I was coming up through the ranks. And so we have this kind of amazing opportunity. My background is, I've founded and co-founded multiple startups, and I've led engineering teams at several early stage startups before coming into a higher education, where I'm Berkeley's CTO. So a $2.75 billion enterprise where no one can agree on anything. My job is to think about our tech strategy. What enables Nobel laureates to have the infrastructure and services they need, and figuring out how to get investment in that from a very tight-fisted administration. So those are all transferable skills. And so, I was given the opportunity, I had this keynote slot, and as I thought about it, I thought, I have a message that I wanted to convey, which is that all of you belong. All of you have a place in the ecosphere of the tech industry and adjacent kind of things as entrepreneurs, but the path is not always clear. But you, and I'm speaking to the people in this room, but also people who are maybe watching this later after the fact on video, you have a unique personality, identity, a set of experiences, a set of knowledge that gives you a unique superpower that only you have. And that fits in and allows you to do pretty much whatever you can believe in yourself that you can do. But that's kind of abstract. And so rather than me talking about that, I've had the pleasure of advising both Ibrahim and Amelia in their companies, and I thought it would be much more powerful to hear from them about their experiences. And so I have a few questions, and then we definitely want to open it up for people to participate as well. So I'll open this up to whoever wants to go first, but maybe just talk a little bit about your background and what led you to becoming an entrepreneur.
Hi everyone. Is this good? Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Ibrahim Baldé. I'm a graduate from UC Berkeley, Law School of Business back in 2020. But beyond that though, first and foremost, I'm a Bay Area native. I actually grew up in the same town as Amelia. And I think, similar to maybe a lot of you, the values of the campus itself were really a drawing point or driving force to come here. Thinking about the rich history of social activism, student and community kind of engagement, and so on and so forth. And so I came to UC Berkeley kind of with this intention: how can I gain as much from that aspect of the campus community, but also deep dive into what the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem has to offer. And really, especially with the kind of change maker kind of mindset, that started to encourage this idea that the social issues or maybe the lived experiences and problems and challenges that I've experienced in my life were relevant enough to kind of build solutions around. And that's essentially the driving force of what got me here into building Blackbook. Beyond that though, I think we're in a perfect place. I think we've heard a lot of that sentiment here before, but I think this campus in particular was the most special place to kind of marry the idea of social impact and entrepreneurship into what's now our venture, Blackbook.
Hey everyone, I'm Amelia. I had kind of a non-traditional path to entrepreneurship. I graduated from Lewis and Clark College in 2020. I studied religious studies in Middle East and North African studies, and I was planning on going into journalism. My school had a budding Center for Entrepreneurship and Leadership, and that is where I learned about systems change leadership and encountered the Map the System method. And that really gave me a tool to start to look for solutions after I had been really bogged down by learning about all of the problems in the world we faced. It was really empowering for me to see a group of people who were trying to give students the tools they needed to reach out to people who already had the foundation to make real change, and reach out and say, hi, I'm a student, and I'm interested in learning about how you have organized this large organization with a lot of power, and how I could either become part of that or start a similar organization myself. And so I was very interested in demand for fossil fuels, and learned about how plastic is kind of the fossil fuel industry's plan B, right? If we move towards the trajectory we're on now to reduce demand for fossil fuels in the energy and transportation sector, plastic is going to be the main, it's going to be the main source of demand for fossil fuels. And so I started interviewing people in the consumer packaged goods industry about why that industry is so reliant on plastic, to try to learn where we could find other solutions, and that led me to the idea for Wonderfil, which I didn't really have any intention of starting a company. I didn't really know what Silicon Valley was, even though I am here from the Bay Area. I was more familiar with kind of the social entrepreneurship, almost anti-capitalist kind of vibe in Portland. And so coming here and learning the vocabulary to clearly talk to investors and convince them that my idea was worth investing in was definitely the most tremendous learning experience of my life, and would love to share with anyone who's curious and doesn't have a background in this sort of thing of what people really look for and how to make sure that your idea is viable and feasible in the real world.
Thank you. And that we're actually sort of segueing into the main theme about social impact and entrepreneurship. And I get to work with a lot of students, which is really, truly one of the highlights of my job. And one of the things that I notice is that in older generations, it felt like there was this choice. You were going to do something good, you're going to Teach for America or Peace Corps or something like that, and it was all like a nonprofit path. Or, you were on the corporate, like investment banking, or start a hardcore, VC-backed startup. But is that really a binary? And how do you think about your company's mission today? So maybe we'll start with you and come back to you about, do you have to decide?
Something that I've heard earlier this week from a mentor of mine is the idea that people are at the center of innovation and not technology. And I think the more we kind of delve into this human-centered approach to what we're building, the problems that we're trying to solve, the easier it is to see value in solutions like Blackbook. And so to give you a little bit more context on what we're creating, again, it was inspired by our experiences as Black students at a major institution like this. And for UC Berkeley being kind of accredited as one of the top universities in the country, and even top from an innovation standpoint, the story or the narrative. Ooh, thank you. I got a new microphone. The story or the narrative, at least from a Black student standpoint, was actually quite different. And what we found back in 2000, I want to say 18, it was a USC Race and Equity report that essentially did an audit of every campus across the country. UC Berkeley ranked the second worst in terms of Black student experiences in the state of California. Surprising, right? And so we talk about how great this university is, but if it's failing a specific kind of segment of students, how can we really have this holistic definition? And that's what we started to tackle. So our team came together really with the goal of how can we centralize and support the support infrastructure for Black students, whether that's resource groups, scholarships, mentors, alumni who are trying to give back, in a place that can almost ease the navigation of a student the moment that they get in till when they graduate. And so when we talk about innovation and we talk about what is Blackbook doing that's really different, it's not necessarily the technology itself, but it's its application to a problem. And I think that that's where this concept of where does social kind of impact kind of resonate with entrepreneurship or a for-profit business. It's really being able to think about, again, our lived experiences, the problems, or the theory of change that we want to see in the world, and try to inspire to solve that using the tools that is entrepreneurship, and that's what we did today.
I think one of my favorite things that I learned when I was studying entrepreneurship in school, because it tied so well with my religious studies background, was this idea of conjuring belief in people that your idea is, worth participating in, right? And kind of evangelizing, right? Like, how are you going to build something that people are going to talk about? And that's kind of how I think about the social element of Wonderfil, right? We were thinking about plastic is something that we look at every day. It's impossible to go into a room and not see plastic, right? And the reason that is because it's been incorporated into so many of the production systems that we rely on to distribute goods. And the reason why we're so reliant on plastic is because the plastic industry has done a really, really great job of marketing and labeling and spreading a story about their product, right? That it's extremely reliable, it's very versatile, it's much cheaper than anything else that we have. And so part of my work in doing the research behind Wonderfil was really examining those claims about plastic and figuring out, okay, what is the job that plastic is doing in the consumer package industry? What makes it so scalable? And how can we replace it with something that is even better, right? And I quickly learned that there are so many things that have been incorporated into supply chains that become necessary because we need to make sure that the plastic is okay and not just the product, right? Plastic is really susceptible to UV exposure, really susceptible to heat and other environmental factors that can break it down. And so I think figuring out a way to kind of change the narrative around something that is so prevalent in our lives makes whatever you're putting out in the world more exciting and makes people think of what you're building, right, whenever they look at the thing that's already in the world. So we're building refill stations for liquid and cream products, right? Think a water bottle refill station, but for your shampoo, conditioner, body wash, eventually, right, any liquid or cream product, condiments. And we're putting them in apartment lobbies, dorms, gyms, and stores, obviously. And the intention there is to make a spectacle that people can see and think, oh, I can think of dozens of other places where I would want to put that, and make it really easy to put these refill kiosks there, right? And so there are many, many artifacts in our world, right, like reusable water bottles, plastic bottles that people can look at that we can kind of draw upon for inspiration for how we're spreading the word about our product. And I just would encourage, like, there's so many systems and practices that we have that aren't as efficient, maybe, or aren't as beneficial as we think that they are when we start diving into them. And if you can figure out those insights, you can start to build a new system that really is inspiring and gets people to think about something in a new way.
So I want to follow up on that, and then we'll come back to you, Ibrahim. So what's interesting is that there's a philosophy behind this that was really integral to kind of who you are. But you're building a product, and I want people to really understand what went into that product and some of the challenges you had, and maybe deep dive into what you actually built, because you're a builder and an inventor, and so there was a lot of work that went into that, and then sort of your thoughts then about how that comes into a company that actually will make money.
Yeah, so specifically, my process was I didn't necessarily intend to build a product when I first went out. I just really wanted to understand the problem that consumer packaged goods companies, so we're talking about like P&G, Unilever, Frito-Lay, right, or like the people who make Oreos, right, those kind of companies. Why? Because I was noticing a lot of pushback against plastic packaging. Why was it so challenging for these people to switch away from plastic? And so getting a really good understanding of their obstacles, and that gave me insights on what they had already tried, right? So a lot of these companies had already tried compostable packaging, had already tried aluminum bottles, had already tried other kinds of refill schemes, right? And they had learned a lot, and then they were willing to share that with me because I was a student. And I didn't come to them as an entrepreneur with this idea, I came to them as a student trying to learn about their industry. And so that was really crucial because I learned about what had already worked. I was able to kind of better understand their business model and better understand how much they were paying for packaging, and kind of understand, okay, if I want people to switch over to something else, it has to achieve price parity with plastic, right? And so I realized I really have to understand how much people are paying to package their goods. And so I was seeking that number, right? And I had this, when I was a student, I was able to get a lot more information than I think I could get now. And so that gave me a good idea of like sort of the price range that this alternative needed to meet. And then I realized that refill stations were really the way to go, simply because we can divert the intermediate bulk containers that people are putting their products in directly to the distribution point and avoid sending them to the bottling line. And sending products to be bottled and purchasing those bottles is an additional supply chain cost. And so by diverting those bulk containers to the point of distribution, we save up to 40% of production costs. And those costs can be passed not just to the producer, but to the retailer and to the consumer, ultimately incentivizing them to switch to something more sustainable. And so that was the idea in my head then, but I didn't know what it would look like. And so that's when I connected with my co-founder, very talented electrical engineer. She made a CAD for me of a refill station, and we kind of put the bullet points of what the features would be, made it into a pamphlet, and then I brought it back to those same people that I had interviewed and said, what do you think of this? How much would you pay for it, right? All of those kind of questions. And at that point, our conversation shifted to them critiquing that idea, but then some of them were like, oh wow, this looks great, can I buy it? And that's when, that was one of the key moments of pushing me more towards thinking about this as a business. Before then, we were incorporated, we weren't even consider ourselves co-founders, right? It was just like us friends working on an idea. And so we just refined the product, and once we had our key features kind of developed, thinking about, we had hardly, I think, even interviewed potential users at that point. We just interviewed customers, right? Businesses who would want to buy this. And then we raised grant funding to build our first prototype. And then once we had our prototype that people could interact with, that's when we started collecting feedback on the user experience. And then we further refined based on how people interacted with the machine.
Thank you, Amelia. So similar, Ibrahim, you actually shared a copy of one of the original Blackbooks with me, which I hadn't even known about. And so maybe can you talk about how you thought about this problem space and then your process of transforming that into a company and a product?
And just to double down on something Amelia shared, as a student, you have so much access to folks because they want to just enrich your learning. So just kind of like think on that as you go through the day. But Blackbook similarly started as a research project, and it was a research project based on, what resources were supporting Black students historically at this university. And what we found was that there was a document that existed in the 1980s and 90s called the African American Student Handbook. And this was before computers and everything, but it was a directory, a really simple directory that students would get the moment they walked into a campus that highlighted faculty in different departments, scholarships that were readily available, Black-owned businesses that they, want to support, so on and so forth. And for us, our goal coming out of this research, seeing that there was a declining interest among Black students graduating high school to go to college, I think it's declined around 11%, is how can, based on this kind of inspiration of this historical tool, how can we modernize this as a way to almost ease that access point for students when they're thinking about going to college. And beyond that, we surveyed the community here in our pilot kind of space, UC Berkeley, and truly understand, okay, what are the existing resources? What are the existing solutions that people are using to organize, to kind of find community, to find mentors? And most of it is peer-to-peer. It's student-run initiatives that are enabling and empowering students. And so how can we support these folks in kind of increasing their visibility? One, it's by keeping these folks proximate to our building process. So building out in the open and constantly getting feedback on what features we were thinking about, what aspects of optimal solution would be the best to have, and it might not be here tomorrow, but maybe 2 years down the line you might have that. And keeping them very close to that. And as a result, we've been able to pilot and captured about like 40% of our target market in the past couple semesters. But now we're really thinking, as needs change and as maybe education, problems within the education systems change, how can we consistently reevaluate what our value proposition is to these folks? Is it a matter of basic recruitment into the university? Are the biggest challenges, being able to thrive and graduate on that campus? Or is it a matter of finding a job? We talked about the weather and the current climate. That is an increasing interest for us. And then maybe on the flip side, especially from like a political standpoint, there's a lot of contention around affirmative action. What does this mean for our students, and how can Blackbook be a lever of access or visibility into the best resources to get them into universities? And so now we're thinking broader, thinking more at scale, and our goal is to eventually have a platform, a Blackbook platform at every university across the United States, so that any student who's interested in applying or thinking about applying to that particular campus can have the right conversations, the right levers, the right access points, so that they can find belonging the moment they get in and not have to explore that as they go. So yeah, hope that answers.
That's great. Someone earlier mentioned persistence, and so, you know, has it been an easy path, you know, doing this, especially turning it into a company? Talk a bit about where you've struggled and where you, how you sort of thought about what you needed to do to sort of keep going. Did you ever have doubts that this would even work at all?
I think what comes top of mind for me is when you are at a campus like Berkeley that has a lot of startups, there's almost this this generic version of what the kind of startup journey is. And for us, a lot of the time, similar as a student, right? You start to compare yourself to, okay, what are other startups doing? Oh, they raised a round, we haven't raised yet, we haven't even thought about that. And my advice, or at least my realization through that, is that it's okay. At the end of the day, especially for social-driven innovation, as long as you're working, or as long as what you're doing from a day-to-day standpoint is having an impact on the problem that you're trying to solve, you're going in the direction that you need to go. And so traditional VC may or may not be the right way for you. You know, there's an angel network, or you can gather a network of evangelists who align with your missions and values. You can get grants, same thing that Amelia and I have done. There are a numerous amount of ways to do it. Not every company is going to be that unicorn in like several years, but with persistence, right, with that ability to kind of reevaluate, reflect, pivot, we talked about that the other day, and almost just kind of like align yourself and understand kind of the impact that you're trying to put up, you know, you'll kind of find that ease that you're searching for in those times of uncertainty.
Great. So Amelia, if you can speak to that struggle kind of question, but then also we had some really interesting conversations around taking investment and your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so I would say the most challenging thing has been raising money. It's not so much that there isn't capital out there that is accessible, it's more understanding that raising money is a full-time job. And when you're trying to build a company, right, time management is really, really important. And it's meant that our team has really, you know, bootstrapped, as in we've moved ourselves forward with as little money as possible, which has actually kind of meant that we've had to dive into issues and kind of core drivers of the business more quickly than I think a lot of startups do, who get a lot of funding really quickly. So we've had to think about, like, how are we going to survive month to month based on our revenue, right? And that's something that is going to keep the business alive later on, and that I think a lot of people don't have to worry about at the beginning if there's a huge influx of cash to just kind of float them on. And so I think that as long as you know, have an open mind about, like my co-founder and I have both had part-time jobs the entire time that we've been doing Wonderfil, right? And so we are open to, we are very committed, you know, to the mission that we want to achieve, and we've really aligned ourselves also with stakeholders, like customers basically, who are waiting to buy this, who are kind of keeping us accountable and keeping us on track, right? Everything takes longer than you think it's going to, but if you're able to connect really early on with people who are invested in your solution and what you're building, that's a really good way to kind of keep things moving forward, and they will introduce you to the right people, and that's really how we found the right investors. So yeah, that would be my.
Hello. Okay, cool. And actually, I just wanted to add one thing as well. I think in terms of how traditional VCs evaluate companies, those metrics that are maybe more qualitative than quantitative are sometimes hard to understand to kind of push the needle. But I think the more you as an entrepreneur are kind of honing in on what your KPIs are, or what those kind of key measures of impact are, that in turn will sell eventually, or it will in turn, you know, drive an investment. drive a evangelist and drive someone to support you. I just wanted to kind of add that point of like, there are ways to kind of quantify impact-driven work.
Great. I'm seeing the 5-minute rule here, so why don't we, I'll ask you one question, but then everyone start thinking of your questions. So just a quick question for this group. What do you wish that you had known 3 years ago or something like that you want to share with these people? Maybe you need to think about the answer to that one. Is there anything that, go ahead, Ibrahim.
Yeah, I think lately I've been really fascinated by this idea of like grace, giving yourself grace. And as an entrepreneur, I think you get really caught up in the thing, that final product that you're imagining you're gonna build. And as we mentioned before, like the more you're able to kind of stay proximate to the needs of your target user, the more you're gonna able to understand that once you're building the thing, it's okay if that thing changes. And sometimes that's probably the hardest part in terms of coping or moving forward. But just giving yourself the grace and freedom to understand that, the product itself, it might tweak, it might change, but as long as it's, supporting or solving that need that our users have expressed or that have changed over time, you're doing your job. So yeah, as you're building, remember that you also deserve grace in changing as well.
I wish that throughout this process, I kind of stuck to my roots and kept writing and documenting what I was going through. Because you very quickly, are deciding what to prioritize, and I wish that I had reminded myself from the beginning to kind of make sure to write down all of those kind of key points of change, and luckily those I've been able to document that through conversations and kind of keeping it alive in my memory and telling people my stories so my friends know, and eventually I could write it down one day. But I would just, if you have an idea, the most important thing to do is to get it on paper and to get someone else's eyes on it, or to have a conversation about it, and to really write down your assumptions, because everything else that I had to write down and had to put on paper, like the business plan, the financial model, the pitch deck, that just led to so much, transformation, brought so much into clarity that I think if I had applied that same principle to a lot of other aspects of what I've been through throughout the journey of entrepreneurship, it probably could have brought some things to light that have come up more recently, earlier on.
Well, thank you both. Questions in the back room? Yeah.
So just before I ask my question, I just wanted to say it's really cool to see both of you here. I've actually heard of both Wonderfil and Blackbook, and so it's great to have you here, Ibrahim and Amelia. My name is Eichel. I'm a sophomore at Berkeley, majoring in data science and economics. I also serve as the Vice President of External Affairs for Enactus, which is a global social impact entrepreneurship movement. I think one question that a lot of our members have, when they're pre-seed, early stage startups, is how do you go about building a sustainable revenue stream? How long did that take for both of you to kind of reach, and what was that process like? Because we're social impact startups, and so we have to rely on grants and VC funding or accelerators. How do you kind of go about that?
Okay, just to repeat the question. The question was, for social impact startups, how do you build a sustainable revenue stream, and what was that like for you?
So this was really hard to do. Really good question, because it's a challenge. And I would say understanding what your customers are currently paying for the thing that's already doing the job, right? Your product has a job to be done. They are currently solving that problem some other way. How much are they paying for it? How much can you justify them paying for it? And then really understanding what your costs are. You can start to develop a price, and that once your customers see a price and they know how much you're charging, like ultimately what you need is for them to send you a purchase order and to send you the money. That's how you develop a revenue stream, right? And so it took a long time for us to realize, to understand how much to charge. But the moment we did, we started getting customers, right? And so it's super, super important to, even if you need to charge a little bit more than maybe you would like to eventually, being somewhat transparent with your customers about like what the underlying assumptions and drivers are of that cost, that's a really good opportunity to talk about all of the value that you're creating for them. But yeah, that's the major thing, is coming up with your pricing and starting to actually sell something.
And I was just gonna say, it's something that we're still learning. It's something that we're building into the roadmap of the product in general. I think in this pilot, we've been able to, I guess, discern what, part of the campus can pay for the platform, where it's not specifically licensed to the university at whole, so that users can opt in and they kind of have full control of the platform itself. But the long term, to answer your question, is definitely recruiting. Like, we see our platform being the access point to diversity recruiting for corporates in general.
Well, thank you both so much. The hook is going to come out for us. You can find us all on Twitter and LinkedIn, and as of this morning, I'm on Mastodon. So I would just say, if you're thinking of starting a startup, don't be hesitant. Reach out. If you connect with us, one tip is ask a question. Make us understand why you're connecting, but definitely feel free to reach out. Happy to help you. Thank you very much.